Why would a monster eat your family? Have you seen something you shouldn't have seen?
I know it's real.
You think you know?
You think you know.
Her being here won't stop them. They will go right through her. You think Drago...
Dust Bunny was conceived as an Amazing Stories story, and I remember pitching Mads at the premiere of Rogue One, this episode of television that we were going to do that was designed to homage Amblin movies of the 80s, and in that kind of one-sentence pitch of a little girl hires a hitman to kill the monster under her bed, he was in, and we were in the reception waiting for everybody to shuffle in, and I pulled him aside and I was like, real quick, this is what I'm working on. Are you interested? And he was like, I'm in, send me the script when you're ready. And so that didn't become a television show, and I decided to write it as a feature. And we went from studio to studio, kind of lived and died and lived and died and lived and died at various places, most of which wouldn't let me cast Mads Mikkelsen. And fortunately, we landed someplace that would. And I resubmitted the script to him. And he's like, oh yeah, I remember this idea. And what was so touching for me is I've always assumed Mads was too cool for me because he's such a charismatic human. And what I didn't realize is that he valued our relationship just as much as I did, and that was kind of an interesting wake-up call for me, and what we'd achieved with Hannibal and what we were striving to achieve with Dust Bunny, about this man who is a revered actor who I had put on a pedestal and absolutely loved working with. It never occurred to me that those feelings would be mutual, because they were so heightened in our experience, and he had done so much and had gone above and beyond the call, that when he demonstrated very clearly how much he had his back and how much he valued our relationship and our friendship, and really our brotherhood, was incredibly moving and humbling. There's such a big difference between showrunning and directing a feature. As a showrunner, I never felt that it was responsible for me to take on directing an episode, because that would pull me out of my showrunning duties for nearly 6 weeks. And that felt indulgent and irresponsible. And so I never quite went there as a showrunner, because I was like, I've got to do my showrunning job first, and I've got to do it well. And there was always rewriting, there was always production meetings, there was always time in editing that I never got to spend as much time on set as I wanted to, where all of these things are coming to fruition. And as a showrunner, you are the director of directors. And so I think the biggest experience about directing my own feature was the intimacy that I got to share, not only with the cast, but the department heads and our wonderful cinematographer, Nicole Whitaker, in putting on a show sort of Judy and Mickey, putting on a show in a barn kind of way, where everybody is so enthusiastic and supportive. That's the thing that kind of impressed me the most, was how much support you get as a director, how much team building you get to experience, and the friendships that you create by just being on set in the meetings at every given point of the production in a way that felt like a luxury compared to my showrunning job. So my big takeaway is I want to do more of it, because I loved that level of intimacy and that level of team building. And it's an indie movie, so there's always going to be your detractors. What was wonderful is to be in this little boat with a bunch of like-minded people who were all rowing the same direction, and that felt very rewarding because I never got to experience that so personally, as there is a bit of remove as a showrunner because you're always expected someplace else, and there's always another episode coming after the one that you're doing now, and then there's one after that and one after that, etc. So the ability to live and be present in making a film with like-minded folks was wonderful. I have been obsessed with Sigourney Weaver since I was, I believe, 9 years old and saw Alien for the first time. And it wasn't just the role of Ripley that had me smitten with her, but so many roles that she has done over the years. One of my favorites is her role in Working Girl, and one of my favorite line deliveries of hers is after Melanie Griffith says, thanks, Catherine, and she's like, and call me Catherine. And it's so oblivious, and it creates such a sense of her entitlement and imperiousness that it manages to be really sharp and witty and well maneuvered as a comedian. And I love her collaborations with Christopher Durang, and so much of the public theater performances of those absurdist comedies. So because she is constantly cast in these roles where she is a power figure of a certain stature, that there was something about bringing her back to comedy that I was really excited about, and also giving her permission to be silly and indulgent in a way that sometimes took her out of her comfort zone, but she was willing to go for the ride, and that was incredibly satisfying. What was wonderful about casting Sophie Sloan in Dust Bunny, it was such a wild prospect to find this little girl who was going to carry this movie, and we had a wonderful casting director in Margie Simpkins, who cast a very wide net all over the world. They had thousands and thousands and thousands of submissions, and I believe they had 900 auditions after those submissions, and they whittled those down to 20 actors, and then that got whittled down to 12 actors, and immediately Sophie Sloan popped. And but she had a very thick Scottish brogue. And we said to her, we love you, your performance is so charming, but if we cast you and Mads Mikkelsen, nobody will understand what anyone is saying in this movie. And Maz was so impressed with her audition that he was championing her and saying, let's just move the movie to Scotland. Let's just say that she's a little Scottish girl because she's so good, and he was worried about having her to navigate an accent as well as her performance. And she went off after we told her, we love you, but your accent is very thick. She went off and watched TikTok videos for 2 weeks, taught herself a perfect flat American accent, and came back and auditioned and won the role. One of the conversations that we started having with Dust Bunny and the aesthetic of the film, Nicole Whitaker, our cinematographer, and we talked a lot about the sweetness of Pushing Daisies contrasted with the savory quality of Hannibal. And what we landed on is that Dust Bunny needs to be, if Pushing Daisies is sweet and Hannibal is savory, then Dust Bunny needs to be mango chicken, and it needs to be both sweet and savory and have a sense of its own maximalism that stems directly from some of my favorite French maximalist movies, as well as kind of crafting our own story and our own world in a way that Dust Bunny feels unique despite its derivations from some classics in cinema and television. But we really wanted to make sure that Dust Bunny didn't look like any other movie, but was being informed by our love of so many different genres. One of my favorite things about the premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival was being able to spend so much time with Sigourney Weaver promoting the movie. I am so tickled by her performance in the film, and I'm hoping audiences will be equally charmed to see this icon of cinema, venturing out and doing things that are absolutely in her wheelhouse and we've seen flavors of before in previous performances, but creating a unique character in this film that shows us that Sigourney Weaver has not stopped evolving as an artist. There are all sorts of ways to keep telling stories, and I think my experience in television knows that after a season finale, there's another season. Not always, in my experience, but occasionally. And so I've always have an idea on where the story could go next.